And I am live, or as my internet sobriquet goes, Gordy Canuck, and you are watching Act One. Act One, a Canadian take on news events. Today is, I almost said October, August, August 31st. We made it to the end of summer, basically. August 31st, 2025. For a lot of people, this represents this weekend, the Labor Day weekend represents the end of summer, although technically we still have another 3 weeks. Fall will not commence until September 21st. That I believe is the first day of autumn or fall. And I appreciate you coming on board. Danny's already here. Some others are watching as well. You're welcome as always to fill up the live chat on my what I like to call my miserable and pathetic little YouTube station. No production values. I've heard a new word, not a new word, but a new description for stations such as my own, and the term is raw. And I think I like that. It sounds a little better than saying miserable and pathetic. It's a raw station, no high production values, no mic, no fancy lighting, no fancy graphics, no green screen type technology, very bare bones basic. Basically, I'm the content. I have Robert Chorney has shown up. I appreciate you chiming in. Anyone new? Danny, I know, and Danny is writing raw and unscripted. Uh, I put these under the hashtag category live and unscripted. And I like doing my videos in this fashion because scripting things out ahead of time and then pre-recording them, and you're never quite happy with the way things come out. I just prefer to put my feet to the fire more or less, and here it is. Here's the content, undressed up. And if you like this kind of content, if you like raw, unscripted, unvarnished, no lipstick on a pig, if you like this kind of content, you are, of course, welcome to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you're notified, et cetera, likes, commentary, comment, filling the comment field. All those things are greatly appreciated. I'm a now 59-year-old. I turned 59 this summer, born 1966, Canadian, someone who spent close to 10 years growing up in the United States. So I have, we all have a unique perspective, as do I, and mine is the perspective of a guy crowding 60 now, who spent most of his life growing up in Canada, did spend 10 years growing up in the United States, Oregon, New York City, New Jersey, lived in Ontario, lived in Quebec. Quebec is Canada's French-speaking province. That's the only official language in Quebec, la langue française, and I débrouille, I can get by in it. But at any rate, I'm going to be talking tonight about a topic called epigenetics, which I've done a fair bit of reading on, but I need to qualify things because I do not come from a scientific background. So when you get into the nuts and bolts and things like mechanisms of action, and you get deep into the weeds, that is beyond my pay grade, beyond my ken, if you like. I understand it, I think, reasonably well from a layman's perspective from 100 miles up. I understand things conceptually, but when you get deep down into the weeds, that's where I can get into trouble. And so I just throw that out ahead of time. Uh, I'm going to try and stick to that which I know. I welcome questions, comments, queries, everything in the comment field. Uh, and if I don't know an answer, I have no compunction whatsoever in admitting that I don't know something. Uh, but I wanted to frame this within the context of current events, the world that we're living in right now. We're living in interesting times, certainly. And there's been something of an overreaching theme on my station going back for the past 2 years, which I started doing this channel toward the end of 2020, and it ramped up over time. during the COVID era. It was an avenue for me to express my ideas and my frustrations with so many of what I saw to be blatant contradictions of the COVID era. And then things have ramped up from there. And COVID served as certainly a genesis for this idea that there's an alternative agenda a lot of the time. So we're not always given the full and unvarnished truth behind so much of what is foisted upon us by government, by agencies like the globalist agencies like the UN, like the World Economic Forum. Many will know of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberger Group, Coconut Grove, Club of Rome. There are all manner of these, what I will call elitist organizations that involve people with enormous power, wealth, and influence who basically trying to direct the course of human affairs and steer things in a direction. And probably a great example of that would be the United Nations with their 17 sustainable development goals. And I want to touch on that because there is this perception among many, and it's not hard to wrap your head around it and around this perception that the world is severely, grossly overpopulated. We are at 8+ billion people living on the earth in the year 2025. It was in sometime last year or two that we crested that 8 billion threshold. And the population, if you go to the world population clock on world meters, which it's a site that a lot of people became familiar with because of the COVID era, because it tracked, the number of people testing positive for COVID, the number of people who were having their deaths attributed to COVID, and it broke it down by individual nations. Well, that same world meter site also has a world population clock. And if you open it up, you'll see that the world population continues to grow. I haven't looked at it for a while now. It's probably been 7, 8 months, maybe a year or more since I've looked at that site. But we're talking about every year the population of planet Earth is growing I believe in the tens of millions of people, adding the population the size of a country. And Danny is unfortunately writing that I am choppy. How are things right now? I noticed that I was choppy, but now things seem to be working better. Are they working better now, Danny? Can you give me a thumbs up if they are, or Robert Chorney or anyone else watching? I apologize for the quality of my connection. I live, the picture of the CN Tower in the background notwithstanding, I actually live 100 miles, 150 kilometers or so from the big smoke, Toronto. I live out in the boonies. I live in a farming area. The area I live in is famous for apple orchards. And Danny is writing that it is a bit better. I don't know that there's much I can do. Before starting the video, before going live, I shut down and restarted to kind of clear out the cache. I'm not a technical guru by any stretch of the imagination. And I've closed all my other tabs. So trying to keep, at least on the computing side, the resources that I have, as many of them available for the live stream as possible. But I can't do anything about the size of the pipe, my bandwidth. It is what it is. But at any rate, so hopefully things are working a bit better right now. And I want to dive into this. Firstly, talking about the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And these are predicated on a belief held at the UN and other globalist type bodies that that planet Earth, that there are simply too many people chasing too few resources, and that we're going to start to run out of things. I've actually come across university studies. One was done by the University of Texas, and I notice I'm getting choppy again. I'm thinking of stopping. I'm thinking of backing out and coming back in So I'm going to do that because that improves the quality. So if you're watching right now, just stick around for probably less than a minute. I'm going to go out and come back in. And I'm back. I apologize for that momentary break. I think it was less than a minute, probably 20 seconds or so. Realized something in this household. There is a school-aged individual who does not have school tomorrow and who also likes to access the internet, and that can limit the available bandwidth for my live stream. So I've just put out the request, hey, get off the internet. And hopefully that will improve things as well. If you can let me know that things are working better now, I think they are. It does look better on my end. At any rate, so I was talking about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals put out by the UN, and they're basically predicated on the idea that there are too many people in the world chasing too few resources. It said this University of Texas study that I looked at postulated that at current rates of consumption, global consumption, the rate at which we are consuming the Earth's resources, that the planet over the long term can actually only sustain a population of 1.9 billion, less than 2 billion. And that, so 8 billion obviously is way too much. And the question might be asked, and reasonably so, well, if the planet can only sustain 1.9 billion long term, how is it that we are able to have a population in excess of 8 billion now? And the argument put forward is that the planet had enormous reserves built up, but that over the past 100 or so years that we've been depleting those resources, and that unless there is a dramatic change in the reasonably foreseeable future, that we are heading to a time of privation, that we could run out of things like potable water, drinkable water, or oil, or arable land, and that severe changes need to be made. And so these 17 sustainable development goals are all centered around this. And anyone paying attention has heard ideas put forward like the so-called 15-minute cities. This is also centered around this idea of the UN SDGs, where people live in a confined area where everything you need is accessible within a 15-minute walk or bike ride very close, so that you don't need to travel, so that your quote unquote the carbon footprint, the big bad boogeyman, the carbon footprint, which they say leads to the greenhouse effect, which traps the Earth's ultraviolet rays in this blanket, this greenhouse effect blanket that keeps the heat from escaping. And we've all heard the scenario. I'm going to read what Danny is writing, and Danny says that my connection now is 5 out of 5. Fantastic, good. Danny's writing that God created this place and knew exactly how many people there were going to be. There is more than enough to go around. If the government doesn't take it or stop us from getting it. And Eat Me writes, this is pure BS. If food was so scarce, why grow corn as a fuel additive to be used in ethanol? And everyone's now saying hello to each other. If you're new to the stream, Danny and Eat Me are regulars. Anyone else popping in? Danny and Eat Me are both from Montreal, Canada. However, wherever you are in Canada, the United States, or the world, we'd love to hear where you're watching from. But at any rate, um, so there's this idea that the planet is overpopulated, and that there are two basically competing issues, because we live in something of a bipolar world. On the one hand, we have the developed world, and then we'll have the developing world. And in the developed world, I'm talking the Western developed world, Western Europe, Canada, US, Australia, the Western developed world, overpopulation is not an issue. In point of fact, basically every developed Western nation on planet Earth does not have a fertility rate or birth rate sufficient to replace its current population. A country like Canada, if it were not for immigration, our population would be in decline. That is likewise true for the United States, for Western Europe, for Australia, for New Zealand. Only one outlier. There's only one outlier. There's only one developed nation in the world with a birth rate and fertility rate sufficient to maintain and even grow the population. And that one single nation is Israel. Every other nation in the world, if it were not for immigration, our populations would be in decline. So, overpopulation is not a problem of the Western developed world. The problem of the Western developed world is overconsumption. We use too much. Two car, three car. When I was growing up, if someone had a two-car garage, wow, you're rich. A two-car garage. Now, three-car garages are everywhere in newer homes that are being built. You got to have a three-car garage now. And now everyone is plugging into the grid to charge their devices, their tablets, their phones, their computers, their laptops, everything. And to say nothing of electronic vehicles, plugging into the grid, drawing electricity to fuel everything, everything to fuel our world. So the problem in the Western developed world is not overpopulation so much as it is overconsumption. The developing world, by contrast, on a per capita basis, they consume far less. They're not driving electronic vehicles. They don't need to extract lithium and cobalt and nickel and everything out of the ground to create these electronic vehicles. They're in the developing world, there are strata within the developing world. You have a country like Bangladesh and you have a country like India. Even India itself is something of somewhat bipolar in of itself. You have areas like Bangalore, which are like the Silicon Valleys with high standards of living, but then you have rural areas where people are living very basically sustenance living, just living day to day. And in that part of the world, in the developing world, the problem is birth rates, fertility rates. That's where the problem of overpopulation comes from, not from the Western developed world. And how am I going to tie in epigenetics, this idea of epigenetics, and halting the aging process into this? I openly speculate, I openly wonder whether or not medical science has advanced far enough to have reached a point where could they potentially have figured out a way to stop the aging process and maybe even reverse it. And it gets into this idea of epigenetics, which is something I started reading up on more than 10 years ago. And I haven't kept up with it over the last 5 years. I kind of read up on it going back over 10 years ago. And over the course of a number of years, I did a lot of reading on it. And basically, epigenetics is I've got to break it down. Epigenetics is two words put together. Epi is a Latin word. The prefix epi means above, over, top of. When you hear about the epicenter of a earthquake, it is the point on the earth directly above wherever the earthquake occurred. So they'll say that the epicenter was in some town in Turkey, and that's the epicenter. It's above the point, and they'll say that the earthquake occurred at a depth of 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers, whatever the depth is. But the point they give you, the epicenter, is the point above that. And so epi is a Latin word and it means above. Genetic, we should all know what genetics is. I've included in the thumbnail for this the double helix strand DNA. your genetics, the thing, what determines how tall you are, your eye color, everything like that, everything of that nature. But it also plays a role in aging because we all are born and we all grow and we all develop. And I don't know exactly what age to put it at. I don't think it would be universal, but we all kind of grow and develop and develop. And then we hit a plateau, we hit a peak, we stop growing. And that might be around the age of 18, 19, 20, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then we basically plateau. And then in the ensuing years and decades, we start to decay. Calcification, gunk starts building up in our arteries, our hair starts turning gray. I'm amazed at what hair I have. Uh, it's still brown, still dirty blonde, but my eyebrows and my beard, facial hair, they're white, and I am white at the temples. Something happens within it's like switches being turned on and off, and we start down the aging path, and eventually we expire, or eventually we wear out. And the idea of epigenetics, it involves three principal components. This is my understanding, and they are readers, writers, and erasers. And basically, when there are the double helix strand of the DNA, your DNA can be broken up into different areas or domains, and different domains deal with different functions of your genetic makeup, what determines how tall you are, and your hair color, etc. And there are aspects of the of your genetic domain that deal with things like our arteries clogging up with gunk, calcification, or whatever. Just your arteries no longer functioning as well as they used to. And what a reader does is it goes into the specific domain that regulates a certain function of human development, and it reads what state it is in. And it could be described as it could be in the on state or in the off state. It could be in the disease state or the non disease state. So, the purpose of a reader in epigenetics is to basically give a status quo. Where are we? Is that particular part of the domain, the genetic domain, is it in a disease state or a non-disease state, healthy state, unhealthy state? And then writers and erasers then involve something that seems to me somewhat akin to the technology used in the mRNA, messenger RNA platform that was used for the COVID jabs. And that is in recruiting proteins to go into that domain and then to take a switch in in the genetic sequence in a specific domain, and then to turn a switch from a disease state to a non-disease state, to take a switch that's turned off and turn it back on, or to take a switch that has been turned on and turn it off. And this can deal with things like why the regenerative capacity for the body to replace its cells diminishes over time. And are there aspects of the genetic sequence, specific domains, where do do switches get turned on and off? And do we have the capacity now through technology, through protein recruitment and things of this nature, to go in and take a gene that is in a disease state and flip the switch so that your cells start to replace more as efficiently as they did when you were in your 20s. I'm in my 50s now, Could they take someone in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s and start playing around with the genetic building blocks of life and return a person from an aging state to a state where they do not age? And I pretty much given the 100-mile up view of what I understand of epigenetic research. And it does not get a lot of play. You don't read about this in the mainstream media. They'll talk to you about every disease out there and about the trials going on for all manner of different conditions, whether it be something as benign or every day as measles, measles, mumps, rubella, and polio, and Eastern equine encephalitis and Marburg disease and all these other conditions, but you're not going to read, at least I have not seen for a protracted, I don't think I've ever seen in a mainstream media piece, uh, something like the CBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, talking about epigenetics and the ability of scientific researchers to go in and manipulate the building blocks of life. And I want to juxtapose that with the mRNA jabs that they came out with, first authorized in December of 2020, emergency use authorization in the US, interim use authorization is what we called it here in Canada. But prior to COVID coming along, I wonder how many people were aware of mRNA. How many people knew that mRNA stood for messenger RNA? They probably, if you put those words in front of someone in 2019, 18, 17, 16, or years previous, do you know what this is? They go, Mr. No, Mr. NA, Mr. Not available. What, I don't know, messenger RNA. What the heck is that? And what we found out subsequent to COVID coming along is that for 20 odd years, this platform, this idea of sending instructions into the body, injecting people with a nanolipid particle containing instructions telling our bodies what proteins to recruit and how to assemble those proteins in order to create the component of a virus. What? I didn't know that was going on. But when it came out in 2020, they were very quick to say, well, this, because a lot of people made the assertion that, well, this is experimental. And the way that would be confronted, the way the mainstream purveyors of the mainstream narrative combated this claim, well, they're experimental, is they said, no, it's not experimental. They've been working on this for 20 odd years. This is not new. It's just that we were not aware of it. No one was aware that and going back to the 1980s, the Salk Institute, SALK, prestigious, got to be a genius to work at the Salk Institute, that they've been working on this platform going back into the 1980s. It's more than 20 years that they had been working on this platform, and it's more than 20 years that research has been conducted into this field of epigenetics. And just because we're not aware of it, I have to wonder to what degree how far have things gone along? And have we reached a point now where there are compounds that can be ingested, that can take our genetic coding, and can it turn switches on and off from disease state to non-disease state, turn things on and off, and either halt completely the aging process or potentially maybe even reverse it and get us, and get humanity living like we were in our 20s. Imagine if you could go back to your 20s when my knees didn't hurt all the time, and inflammation and all the things that, break us down and lead to us heading to our ultimate reward. And I'm just going to speculate right now and say, hey, imagine, just hypothetically speaking, Let's say that this technology does, in point of fact, exist, that there are individuals, researchers, and this kind of research is very expensive, obviously. It's not cheap, it's not something you're doing in your basement. Uh, so there's big money interest behind it. Uh, let's say they've had a breakthrough last year, maybe 5 years ago. Let's say they've achieved the ability to halt the aging process. Is that something in a world with 8 billion people, with all the problems of overconsumption and everything else? Would they want to introduce it writ large to the global population? It would be a huge seller. Imagine the money you would make. But if you look at the uber rich individuals, the type of individuals who typically fund this type of research, look at a guy like Bill Gates and his investments in Moderna and other biotech enterprises. Uh, his biggest concern seems to be, how do we reduce the human population? Everyone knows the TED talk he did where he talked about the problem of overpopulation. And he said, if we do a really good job with healthcare and with things like vaccines, maybe we can reduce it. It's hard to tell. I think he says, I think maybe we can get it down 10%, get that global population down with improvements in healthcare and vaccines. Conspiratorial minded individuals, and I'm one of them, hear words like that from a guy like Bill Gates with the amount of money that he has, one of the richest men in the world. Who knows? Is he one? Is he two? Is he three? You know, once you get to that level of wealth, and you have to wonder. Danny, early in the stream, wrote something interesting, and I'm on top chat. I need to switch to live chat. Just want to make sure I don't miss anything. Danny wrote something about adrenochrome is a good place to start if you're absolutely evil. I know only the bare bones basic about what adrenochrome is said to be conceptually. Adreno obviously shares the same uh, prefix as adrenaline. What little I have read on adrenochrome is just simply too evil for me to even want to. I don't even like confronting the idea. The thought that it could, something like adrenochrome could be real, is so mind just it is so evil. There's a tendency, and I suffer from it, to, when things are extremely evil, basically you want to pretend that they can't happen. That's just too evil. The depravity for humanity, it could never get that low. And although, look at what happened in Stalin's Russia, look at what happened in Mao's China. I think Stalin murdered somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 million of his own citizens. When you look at Mao in China, I think you're getting up to 100 plus million, or in that neighborhood anyway. So the idea that the depths to which humanity can fall is potentially bottomless. And so I'm not going to go into adrenochrome. How do you get an individual into a heightened state where they're expressing a compound like adrenaline? I'm not exactly sure what you classify adrenaline as. I guess it's a hormone. Not entirely sure. My medical degree is from the internet. I've said on this station many times, I do not have a medical background, a scientific background. I don't think I'm completely out of my depth in that I did take science or university level science courses, but that was not my area of study. I was studying political science and the humanities. I did take some psych, took some courses in ecology, environmental science, learning, the biodiversity of a sand dune. I remember that well. But at any rate, uh, I'm going to go a little further down this rabbit hole, if you will, and this idea that speculating that there is individuals have developed epigenetic type compounds that can take a person's genetic material, turn it from disease to non-disease state, turn things off and on to stop, and possibly even reverse the aging process. But if that were to be the case, I would suspect that the individuals financing with their hands on the purse strings, that it would be something they would not want released to the broader population, at least not yet. At least not yet while we're at 8 plus billion. There would need to be something happening. Many will remember the old Georgia Guidestones. The Georgia Guidestones appeared out of nowhere around 1980 in a farm field in Elberton, Georgia, granite country where there are a lot of granite quarries, and this huge mammoth granite monument, which was dubbed America's Stonehenge, just magically appeared overnight. Although there was an opening ceremony that had luminaries who had, the movers and shakers of the world. There was something of a ceremony there, but it wasn't on ABC News, NBC, wasn't on CNN. That, today in Elberton, Texas, the Georgia Guidestones were unveiled. Now they went up very quietly. Um, and this was a granite monument, somewhat like Stonehenge, astrologically aligned, a capstone that had a slit cut through it that tracked the North Star and the solstices, things of that nature, very much like the pyramids or like Stonehenge. And written on the Georgia Guidestones, there were 4 stones, and in 8 languages, 8 of the world's most prominent languages, English, Chinese, Arabic, maybe 8 prominent world languages, were written 10 guiding principles. Let these principles be a guide to a new and enlightened age, et cetera, something to that effect. And the number one guiding principle in 8 different languages, and on the capstone, they were reiterated in 4 ancient languages. I think one was Egyptian hieroglyphs, another was Sanskrit. So the number one guiding principle was to maintain human population planet-wide, global population at less than 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Well, if we're at 8 plus billion, you want to take it down below 500 million, that would be 7.5 billion plus people gone. That's like 90% of the world's population would need to be eliminated at some point in order for the number one guiding principle of the old Georgia Guidestones. They were blown up 2021, 2022. That when they were blown up, it made the news. NBC, ABC, CBS, they all covered the fact that a car was seen driving to them. They're under 24-hour a day, they're under constant video surveillance. There was something of a minor tourist attraction. Someone drove up, planted a bomb, and blew them up. And within hours, it was almost like the World Trade Centers in miniature. You remember how fast the debris at the World Trade Centers was cleaned up. Well, it was like that in miniature and faster. Within hours, they cleaned up these old Georgia Guidestones and took them away, and they're gone. And we're 2, 3 years after they were blown up, and there's not one single word out there about anyone ever having been charged with a crime. Go out and blow up a structure, and they get away with it completely. Just going to catch up on what's being written. Danny is writing that adrenaline, also known as I can't pronounce it, inophrin or something like that, is a hormone. So I got the hormone part part right, and medication that the prepares the body fight or flight. Yeah, we all know what adrenaline does. I got a burst of adrenaline because you were super afraid by increasing heart rate, blood flow to muscles, etc. Um, writes that Stephen King wrote a sequel of The Shining. Doctor Sleep talks about young kids being nabbed by spiritual beings, scared to death before. Yes, that's what I know of adrenochrome. And there was also a movie that starred the actress who was in that 70s show, the dark haired actress. I forget her name. I forget her. I never watched the 70s show too much. Uh, was her name Jackie? I'm not sure. She was Austin Kutcher's girlfriend in the show, or at least part of the time. Anyway, she went and she did a movie that was called, I believe, Jupiter Rising, and it would have come out in 2015 or right around there, because I know, because that was when I was moving back to Ontario from Quebec City, and I was on a house hunting trip. I was in the army and getting posted from Valcartier, CFB Valcartier to CFB Trenton. And we were on a house hunting trip. And one night we went out to the movies. And the movie we went to see was called Jupiter Rising. And it had elements of adrenochrome in the movie. These were otherworldly beings, one of whom could be described as an angel, interdimensional beings, and they created a substance that these alien, ageless creatures, these alien beings, human in form, would then bathe themselves in. And they would go in and they'd look like they were my age or a little younger, but 40, 50, 60. And they'd go walk in to this bath of solution, whatever you want to call it, and then come out of it like they're 17, 18 years of age again. And I remember thinking of it back then. You talk about this idea of predictive programming, and that came to mind even all the way back then. Uh, and then me was talking about that using this substance to rejuvenate others. Um, And then Danny's giving me what the number, he's giving me, probably cut and paste the number one guiding principle from those old Georgia Guidestones that again they were up for all the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. They were up for 40 plus years. And anyone who wants to accuse me of being a conspiracy theorist, the Georgia Guidestones were not a conspiracy theory. They were a real, actual, verifiable monument. Um, Unless NBC News was promoting conspiracy theories by reporting on their destruction. But anyway, Danny's put down what I assume to be probably a cut and paste of the number one guiding principle: maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. The remaining nine uh, guiding principles were largely centered on what I will call Gaia worship, paganistic Mother Earth Gaia worship, and this idea that human beings are a cancer on that we are a threat to this Gaia. We are a threat to this goddess, the goddess Gaia. We are a threat, and we have to be dealt with. And it's a question of if we, when you have I have to bring my faith into this. And Lucifer, Satan, the enemy of Christ, the enemy of God, preaches a narrative of scarcity. There's not enough to go around. Satan plays on fear. And a great way to get people afraid into a state of fear is to tell them there's not enough to go around. Whereas the gospel good news of Jesus Christ, the good news of the Bible, is that the Lord God, creator of all things, preaches a message of abundance. There's more than we heard in and around the year 2000. There was this narrative being promoted in the mainstream that the world's oil was going to start to run out. Actually, this theory came out in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was called peak oil. And it was put forward that in and around the year 2000, around the millennium, that demand for oil was going to outstrip the available supply. We were going to start running out of oil in the year 2000, 25, a quarter of a century ago. We were supposed to be hitting that point at which demand for oil and the available supply of oil were going to meet. And the demand would keep climbing, and the available supply was supposed to start declining. It never happened. Now, supposedly, the mainstream narrative is that oil is a non renewable resource, that we're talking about dinosaur bones and decomposed material from millions, if not billions of years ago, and that there's a finite quantity available. And I have to openly speculate on whether oil is it constantly renewing. Science has proven to be woefully inadequate uh, throughout my lifetime and throughout human history in serving as a predictive tool. And it has gotten so many things wrong before. Well, and they always say, well, we didn't know enough. We weren't wrong based on the understanding that we had back then. That was the right answer, but now we know more. So they never say they were wrong. That would signal weakness. They want you to trust science blindly. But is it possible that oil is constantly renewing? Maybe it doesn't take millions, billions of years for these oil reserves to build up, because we keep finding more and more and more and more. There's 25 years worth of oil in the Middle East in what is called the Caspian oil basin. They have found 25 years worth of oil for the global market at global supply. There's enough oil under the Caspian Sea to supply the world with oil for somewhere around 25 years, just in that one tiny location. Are we really heading toward an energy crisis? Is this just a way in which to scare the population, to frighten us into thinking that there's not going to be enough? That God, when he created our wonderful creation, that he didn't do a good enough job. This is what outfits like the World Economic Forum promote. They promote the idea, they divorce the notion, they repudiate the notion that this is a created world. They hold, if you listen to Yuval Noah Harari, who was Klaus Schwab's top number one advisor at the UN, and watch his interviews and his talks, and basically he expounds fully on this atheistic worldview that everything that we have right now is all just the result of a bunch of random accidents. Everything is that we're living right now is simply the result of random chance accidents. And he says that now we've reached the point in history where we can take charge and no longer be subject to the whims of random chance, but now we can engage in directed evolution rather than random mutations and things of that nature, just randomly giving us the results. We're going to direct this evolutionary process, and we're going to blend the digital and the biological world. And we're going to usher in to use Aldous Huxley's words, a brave new world. And it scares me. And then Danny's writing more on the Georgia Guidestones. So the 10 messages, the 10 guiding principles. languages, and they were English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian on the main stones, and the introductory phrase was in four ancient languages: Babylonian cuneiform, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics on the capstone, totaling 12 languages. So four ancient, eight modern. Thank you, Danny. Appreciate that. I've read all this before. I can't remember all 10. Uh, I know that one of them was be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature. That was one. Uh, unite humanity with one common language. That was another. And there were 10 in total. Some of them are very repetitive, redundant in nature. They're also redundant in nature. Sorry, bad joke. Um, and they harp a lot. The full 10 harp a lot. You can find them on Wikipedia. They harped a lot on nature worship. Again, Gaia. They don't name Gaia specifically. Gaia is a paganistic deity, representative Mother Earth, this idea. And that is the basis of a lot of, like Wicca and other nature based paganistic quote unquote religions. Uh, let me see what's Eat Me is writing that Mila Kunis, she does Meg's voice in Family Guy. Oh, okay, that's the name of the actress, Mila Kunis. Uh, actually, now that I think about it, yeah, I'd never thought about who Meg was in Family Guy. I don't watch Family Guy a lot. I'm familiar with it. Peter Griffin, Stewie, Brian, Quagmire, giggity giggity, or whatever he says. So I know it. I'm familiar with it, but not too much. Danny, Eat Me regulars know I say it often. I don't have television, but I do have YouTube, obviously. And I only cut the cable when I only got off cable in and around 2010. So for the last 15 years or so. So anything that predates 15 years ago, I'm still I know about it. Uh, then Danny's writing, if you happen to wear a tinfoil hat, wear it proudly with my brother. I do. Uh, and Danny, an important line from scripture, we are not to live on bread alone, but we are to live. That's Jesus tempted by Satan in the desert, take these stones, turn them into bread. And Jesus quotes Old Testament scripture and says, man is to not live by bread alone, but is to be sustained totally by the word of God. And I'm paraphrasing. And I'm not going to go digging through Matthew and try and find the exact quote. Uh, Danny's writing that there is more oil in North America than there is in the Middle East. That's entirely possible. I wouldn't surprise me in the least. I think there is a pretty much a limitless supply of oil in the world, and I have to openly speculate. You know, is it renewing as we speak? As we draw it out, is more coming back? I was thinking about this the other day, and the fact that we used to. They talked about the tar pits. There used to be tar pits, and they found fossilized remains of things like saber tooth rather, saber tooth wildcats that got caught into these tar pits. And I have to wonder, if we had not been exploiting the world's oil, might we have tar pits around? Just an open thought, and didn't explore it too deeply, just something that occurred to me. But, is it possible that oil is renewing? And I know what happens when you put out a thought like that. Quite often you'll get the gaslighters, the one, oh, sure. You know, everyone knows that, it took billions of years for the oil to be created by decomposing animal and plant matter. We all know this. How do we know it? Well, they told us. They told us. How do you know? People don't know what they know. People think they know things that we have just been told. We have been indoctrinated. We've been told this is the right thing to think. This is the proper way to approach things. Okay. And if you're a good person, you want your gold star, you want your 80, 90, 100% on your test, well, then you're going to regurgitate whatever is handed to you. Uh, let's read on. Danny's writing by telling us there is not enough, the elites, and then there's not enough for you. Well, there's plenty for them. We want you to fly only once every 2 or 3 years, but we're going to continue to jet off to Davos and to, Coconut Grove, and we'll continue to have our Bilderberger meetings at secret locations all around the world. But for you, the great unwashed, and this is the world we are devolving into. Um, and they think we won't notice because there's a lack of it. Yeah. I love what Danny writes. He puts us in most of the live streams. Jesus is king. He loves us and gave us plenty. Jesus was there in the beginning when the world was made. Recall that in Genesis it says, let us create man in our image, after our likeness, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Danny's of the opinion that Stewie is the linchpin of Family Guy. Okay. He is funny, strange voice. And Danny's saying that he cut his cable in the middle of 2020. Had enough of the propaganda. I think that's a big reason why I was able to question things and think clearly through the COVID era. At that time, I was still posted. I was still in the military. I was working in a radar station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, rotating shift, days and nights. And the television, we had a television at the radar station, and it was hooked up to Bell satellite. And the only rule with regard to programming was that during weekday business hours, when the brass might show up, anytime, say between 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning and 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, during that window, Monday to Friday, the only type of programming we were allowed to have on the television was current affairs or news. We're not allowed to have Comedy Central or movies or whatever. Had to be current events or news type programming. So when COVID broke out in March of 2020, when we had the declaration of a global pandemic and then the lockdown stuff that came after it, I was being exposed at that time to that type of programming when I was working weekday daytime, and it hit me right between the eyes. And I said, this is not reporting. This is propaganda. This is sensationalism on steroids. I had never heard such irresponsible reporting in my life. Dun, dun, dun. I've said it many times. Bum, 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 bum. More terrifying news from Bob Cage in Ontario. Why are you telling me it's terrifying? You're a journalist. Just give me the facts. I'll decide how I want to feel about them. No, they were programming me. They wanted me and everyone else listening, watching, to be terrified. Dun, 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 dun. More terrifying news from Bob Cage in Ontario as the tsunami of death. I heard this. The tsunami of death at the whatever the name of the nursing home was up in Bob Cage in Ontario. As the tsunami of death continues at the Pine Ridge Nursing Home or whatever it was called in Bob Cage in Ontario. And I remember watching that and going, what? Tsunami of death? I saw Newsweek articles talking about it's like the apocalypse. I'm like, are you kidding me? A little viral respiratory bug is being likened to the apocalypse? Who's dying? 80% of Canada's deaths for the longest time. Even Theresa Tam told the Washington Post that 80% of the deaths being counted as COVID were happening in God's waiting room, in heaven's waiting room, in long-term care, nursing home, hospice type settings where people go to die, where they're so weak and frail and health compromised that they have months, maybe a year or two at most to live. They don't know what day of the week it is. Most residents are suffering from some form of cognitive decline, dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever. I read the statistics published by the Ontario Long-Term Care Association for the year 2018 or 2019, just a year or two prior to COVID. And it said 86% of residents suffer from cognitive decline, Alzheimer's and or dementia. That basically 75 or 76% already had a diagnosis of cardiovascular and circulatory disease. That somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% needed extensive help with simple activities like getting dressed, bathing, feeding, toileting. They needed these are called the activities of daily living in the insurance industry, the ADLs. And pretty much every resident in a long-term care facility in Ontario, governed by the Ontario Long-Term Care Association, something like 90% needed extensive help just with getting dressed. Somewhere it was in and around 50% were on 10 or more medications. We're talking about the frailest of the frail. And that's where the deaths were. And not everyone in that condition is in a long-term care facility, because those long-term care facilities have waiting lists. So there are people who are in that exact same type of condition, don't know what day of the week it is, can't get dressed, can't take a bath, can't do anything on their own. There are a lot of people living in their own homes, and it's family and private care, coming in and providing that level of care for them. It's a population that is on death's doorstep. So if 80% were occurring in long-term care, how many of the rest were living as though they should have been living in long-term care? I don't want to go down the whole COVID thing again. Laura's shown up. Townhouse gardener, if I'm not mistaken, used to be her old. I like what Danny writes. I have 88. Hey, look, a squirrel. I don't, that came up in conversation today. My youngest heading into grade 7, and there's a kid in the neighborhood, and I was told, well, he has ADHD. And I'm like, I probably had if that diagnosis had been around when I was a kid, I see children taking handfuls of medication. And I'm no doctor, but I'm also not a stockholder in the pharmaceutical industry either. And it bugs me to see children taking handfuls. Uh, and we were talking about this yesterday or the other day, my last video. Danny brought up SSRIs, some type of serotonin inhibitor drug that is given for people with depression, and quite often individuals who, don't know whether they're a boy or a girl, a man or a woman. Quite often they suffer from depression. So here, take some drugs. I'll tell you right now, the drug you need. I'm going to end off the video, tonight's video. It is a Sunday, or it was a Sunday. It's now 12:38 in my time zone. But the only drug you need is right here. What I'm holding in my hands, this is a copy of the Holy Bible. And I don't care whether you're reading the King James, the English Standard Revised, the New Living Translation. The best translation of the Bible is the one you're reading. Uh, I'm not going to get into the nitpicky weeds of what's the best translation and what doctrine is the best or whatever. Just get into God's holy word, because you need to navigate this world. There are voices out there that are going to tell you you can't sleep, take a pill. You can't function sexually here. We got a pill for you. If your feet shake around, if you got Jimmy legs, restless legs when you sleep, we got a drug for that. If you're anxious, if you're nervous, if you're that, drug, drug. And the perception is that the God of this world the prince of this world, otherwise known as Lucifer, Satan, the liar from the beginning and the author of all lies. He wants you to believe that you are supposed to be happy all the time and that any discomfort is, that shows you that God messed up. You're unhappy, you're uncomfortable, you can't sleep, you're overweight, whatever. We got a pill for everything. And you can be happy and you can look in the mirror and you can be happy in your own eyes. You can do what is right in your own eyes. Just bow down to this pharmakia sorcery. That's what pharmakia is, a Greek word, and it means at its root sorcery. Take this pharmakia. If you get into God's holy word, you'll read a book like Job, and you'll find that man is born to suffer as the ashes from a fire climb upward. This world is a testing ground. And it's not supposed to be all sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns. There is going to be hardship in this life. Look at the life that our Savior Jesus Christ lived. Look at the death he endured on that cross as, as an emblem, if you will, of the fact that this life is not going to be perfect. We're moving toward perfection. It's on the other side of the veil. We can't see it. We're blinded to it. And so people think that this life is it. There has to be justice on this side of the veil during our natural mortal existence. Well, there's a life beyond that. This flesh suit is merely holding our spirit. It's merely encapsulating our spirit for a time, but there is a life beyond this. Every thought, every dream, every prayer, every emotion, everything you feel. And science has shown this. There are brain waves. We're broadcasting. We are, consciousness does not end. See, I'm getting a lot of hearts. Appreciate the reactions. I'm just going to read up on the last few, and then we'll head from there. So I left off with Danny's funny comment. I have 88 squirrel. I like that. That's cool. I'm going to borrow that in conversation. Uh, and And Denny's, thank you for putting that down. The La Brea tar pits in LA, Los Angeles area they still exist. I couldn't remember the name of those tar pits, La Brea or La Brea. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And then he's being funny. Saber-toothed squirrel too. We still do not know how oil is produced. Then Denny is writing Bohemian Grove. There's another one, Club of Rome, Bohemian Grove. Got all these groups, secretive little clandestine groups that I am convinced are largely Masonic, Freemasons in nature. And it's a fraternal organization. And you better bow down, take the oath, swear allegiance, and be secretive. Be secretive. If you want to advance, if you want to be a mover and shaker in Hollywood, in government, in major corporate industry, well, you better be connected Masonically. Otherwise, you're not going anywhere. And to whom do you wish to belong? Because that Masonic Freemasonry world is demonic. I'm going to say it flat out. That's a belief, but it's beyond belief for me. So it's almost an article. It is an article of faith. The Freemason world, Scottish Rite and all this stuff. This is Luciferian. This is false light. This is demonic. And they will dangle. I worked with Phil, won't say his last name, invited me out. You want to come check out the Masons? No way. And that was even when my feet were not on the Christian path. Anyway, he's writing that Bohemian Grove is a 2,700 acre wooded campground in Monte Rio, California. an evil place, if you want my opinion. Uh, uh, Danny's writing, if you get your job, you will get a lottery ticket, free burger. Eh, not job, but if you get you'll get a lottery ticket, a free burger, a free joint, one Krispy Kreme donut a day for a year. Anyone that should anyone with any degree of intelligence, when they saw the mind-blowingly stupid incentives being offered, "Here, we'll give you a chance to win a lottery, a Krispy Kreme donut, fries and a burger." Yeah. Something any reasonably intelligent person should have, at that point, realized, "Wait a minute. You're bribing me to take something that's supposed to be good for me? What?" But anyway, that ship has largely sailed. See if anything else is being written. Uh, and then Danny's echoing what I said. The best Bible is the Bible you're reading. And I think I said something to that effect earlier, whether it's the English Standard Revised, the New Living Translation, King James, the New King James. There are so many different translations, and there's a reason for that. If I come out with a new translation, if I want to make money, and let's face it, there is graft in the Christian religious world. Absolutely. There are people in the Christian religious world who use it as an avenue. They worship manna. They worship manna. They want money. So if I come out with a new version of the Bible, it has to be at least a certain percentage removed from previous translations. So if I want to change the English Standard Revised, which is what I'm reading here, and I want to come out with a new version, it has to have at least, I think it's 15% difference in content than what is here. So I got to change enough words. And the English language, just pull out your thesaurus and start going crazy with synonyms, and you can come out with other words to make enough changes. I talk about Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 13. I think that's what it is. I've got a bookmark with it written on it. And now I've lost the bookmark. Where did that bookmark go? I think it's Jeremiah 29:13. It's the one that where it says, know that the plans that I have for you, here it is. Jeremiah 29:11, not 29:13. Jeremiah 29:11. I have it on a little bookmark here. And it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." But when I go to my copy of the Bible, it doesn't read that way. The word prosper is not in there. In my version of the Bible, English Standard Revised, it has it in this way: "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil." So where it says here, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, here it says plans for welfare and not for evil. Basically meaning the same thing. When you care for an individual's welfare, that means you want them to fare well, do well, to prosper. So I care about your welfare. I want you to prosper. Basically mean the same thing. And so what has happened is that when a new translation comes out, it has to have a certain percentage deviation from previous translations. Otherwise, it violates copyright. And then you have to pay penalties to the copyright holder. Well, we'll change a few words, and it's not spoken of enough. So, just going to read. Laura is saying we have too much going on at one time, often, and that's by design. until COVID came along. And then COVID, that's all they wanted, the entire development. That's what they want. The world's population all focused in, everyone focusing on COVID and be terrified and be scared. And then we'll provide the answer. We will point to the savior, Anthony Fauci, Teresa Tam, who Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN News or whoever. Danny's writing that he was on Ritalin, and I know that's an ADHD medication, for 5 years before moving in with his father, and I decided I did not need them. So many of the, I had a teacher in high school, Mrs. Humphreys, so I'll even say her name, grade 9 English teacher, and I used to like to eat nibs, those little red licorice things. And she warned me all the way back in 19 would have been like 1980. Yeah, about 1980. She warned me that nibs, anything with red food coloring in it, that it lowered your capacity. It led to hyperactivity and an inability to focus and have attention to detail. And I listened, 14 years of age. No, I used to go into class and I'd have a package of nibs. And they were available at the school from a vending machine. You could get nibs and chips and other crap, wine gums, lots of food dye available. What did the studies say this does to people? Had the studies been done? Now, this Mrs. Humphreys seemed to have known all the way back then about it, but at any rate, again, Danny writes, Jesus is King. Whichever Bible you're reading, read that. I have Leszek Wachowski writing, epigenetics is only one of at least 8 or so mechanisms of cell degradation and aging. So understanding epigenetics is not the end all and be all for prohibiting or reversing the phenomenon of aging. That's fair enough. I'm sure there are other components as well. This just happens to be one with which I have a certain degree of familiarity. This idea above the genetic level, I've had it equated to programming. Think of your genetics, your DNA, as your computer, the hardware, your hard drive. And then epigenetics as being the level above that, being like programming, going in and telling that hardware what to do. And again, erasers, or rather readers, erasers and writers, basically taking domains, areas within the genetic code, and then turning the switches on and off from disease to non-disease. And it gets into this whole idea of binary computing in a way, ones and zeros. And then I like Denny hasn't shared this for a while, but I'll read it off from the book of Ephesians, Paul's letter to the church at Ephesus, from chapter 6, verse 12. Paul wrote, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." I've also seen it translated as in the heavenly realms. We live in a multidimensional world, and we think that that everything we can see and perceive with our 5 senses, that's all there is. But even theoretical physics has put forward that there are quite possibly an unlimited number of dimensions and that we simply cannot perceive them. And it must be remembered the Bible presents us with a creator God who exists outside of time, space, and matter. He created them. So he exists outside of them. And Leszek Wachowski is writing, I think it's the name of the dye, red dye number 40. I think that's what you're referencing. I'm pushing 60 now. That was 14. So it was a couple years ago. when I was told about this dye. Uh, and then Denny's, and there's a word for this, dynamic or a rule, uh, problem, reaction, solution. Create the problem, wait for the reaction you're designing, fear in the case of COVID, and then you offer the solution you already had planned from the beginning. Yeah, and Denny writes, you had it planned all along. Uh, and Lizek Wachowski, if I'm pronouncing that even, I'll stick to Wachowski. Sounds like the character from Monsters Inc. Mike Wazowski, Wachowski, likes my analogy, the software analogy. And that's not original to me. I had it given to me. I once had a conversation with an individual who is like president CEO of of a Canadian company engaged in epigenetic research. And I met him at a conference, oh God, 2016, 17, 18, somewhere around there, well before COVID. Um, and Laura's writing that red 40 makes her jittery. And then he's referring to it also as Allura red. It's such a tough world we're living in. I mentioned, I think, in my last video about something I only just came across with pink slime. I'll invite you to look into that. It's this idea of, um, I think, the ammonia treated residual garbage meat products being treated with something. I think that it was ammonia or something like that, and then being processed and then added to ground beef. And, you know, it just it's distressing the fact that we can no longer trust the element of trust that so many of us have had in this world. And I used to have it. I used to have broad-based trust that, okay, we have government agencies, we have Health Canada, we have these regulatory bodies that are there to police, and put the brakes on any nefarious actions by the food industry or by the drug industry or by any industry, and to ensure, the health and safety of the good Canadian people. And then over time, you slowly wake up to the amount of corruption in this world. And as you get further and further down the Christian path, I'm convinced you'll become aware of forces that are beyond your senses, but that doesn't mean they're not real. They're still, call them interdimensional. I call them satanic. And, I'm convinced when we get into secretive organizations like Coconut Grove, like the WEF, like Bohemian Grove, Club of Rome, Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberger Group. These organizations exist. When the Bilderberger Group meets, they lock down an area, probably a 50 square kilometer area around the meeting place. And it's swept it for listening devices and everything. They want to ensure complete and total secrecy. And all these groups, in my not humble opinion, for me, this is fact. They are Freemasonry. These are Masonic square and compass. These are the architects of this beastly demonic world that we live in, and they love the darkness. That's why they insist when the Bilderbergers get together, total secrecy. Now, the Masons have two sides. They have two faces. They have one that they show to the public. It's manifested in groups like the Shriners. Look at our hospitals. This is a Masonic group. The Shriners, look at the great work we do. That is the PR side of things, the public relation side of things. What's happening behind closed doors, where vows of secrecy take place, hidden, the all-seeing eye, vow of silence, hidden hand. You want to stay completely away from that. Anyway, At any rate, and Eat Me's writing that pink slime was big time in the news all the way back in 2012. Um, and she's writing that she ditched them McNuggets that day. I didn't know it was in McNuggets, but whatever the case, I haven't been to the Golden Arches since the last time. It's been 5+ years since COVID. I haven't gone in once. It bothered the living tar out of me that restaurants like with a drive-through, which are the big boys, Golden Arches, BK. I don't like saying the names, but you know who I'm talking about, the big multinational places that had a drive-through window that their employees were allowed to go and continue working, but a small privately held restaurant that had a single mother working as a waitress and, guy struggling to, work in the kitchen, busting the tables, whatever. Well, you have to close. The big boys got richer. The big boys got richer. The Home Depots, the Weston family, the Walton family, Walmart, they all got richer. While the small business sector in Canada, US, and the Western world got wiped, and it was disgusting. But we all, population wide, probably 80, 90% compliance with all the insanity. Uh, Danny's saying that the only thing that's safe at the Golden Archers is the coffee. That's the last thing I got there because I still had someone give me a bunch of little coffee coupons with the stickers and give me 4 or 5 of them. So I used them up. I didn't buy anything. I might have gotten a muffin or something, but even that case, I haven't been back since those cards ran out sometime in 2020. I haven't been there for a coffee. But anyway, thanks for watching. Gone on nearly an hour and a half. I'll end this the way I like to end my videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking around, all of you. Especially, well, not especially, but it was good to see some new names. Leszek Wolkowski, however that's pronounced. Good to see Laura Floyd back. But Danny and Nancy, thank you for showing up again. There was someone at the beginning whose name has escaped me now because it was relatively new and I can't find it. So never mind. But everyone who showed up, thank you to my miserable, pathetic, raw, unscripted, no production value station. Appreciate the thumbs up. If you want to subscribe, you're welcome to join in the conversation. Cheers back to Mr. and Mrs. Wachowski. And we'll see you all again. I like to end my videos with a blessing from the Book of Numbers, even if you're not religiously oriented, even if you're of a more agnostic, atheistic worldview, accept these words. They're very nice words. They come from the Book of Numbers, chapter 6, toward the end, and they were spoken by Aaron over God's covenant chosen people. And the words are these. It's a kind of redacted, modern, not word for word out of the Bible, but it's may the Lord God, creator of all things, may he bless and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you. And again, may the Lord God, creator of all things, may he grant you peace. Because even in this crazy world, epigenetics, red color dye 40, Ritalin, all the insanity, all the craziness in this world, yes, there's supposed to be pain, heartache, misery. These things happen in this world. But when you get into a relationship with the author of all life, then you can be assured, you have blessed assurance. It's a famous hymn of a reward waiting for you beyond the veil, where every tear will be wiped. No more pain, no more sorrow, no more heartache. There is a reward for those who endure until the end. So God bless. Thank you again. And we'll see y'all when I do my next one. Might start to get more regular now because a certain individual is going to be going to school. So things will be calmer, hopefully. Anyway, God bless. Talk to you soon.